follow these 3 rules, and I've learned them over the years through transitions. First of all, to maintain confidentiality. It seems like a given, but it is so important. You must hold conversations in private and keep confidences with clergy and with clergy spouse and family members. Always follow through. Do what you promise or what you agree to do. If you're not able to do it, go back to them and explain what's happening. But always follow through with what you're promising. And keep your eyes and your ears open. You're kind of the gateway to protect the clergy spouse. If you see that someone is ganging up on the clergy spouse or always asking the clergy spouse to pray at various meetings, you need to nip that in the bud. Invite participation. Don't expect it.
Sure. Just on the first point, the maintaining confidentiality, especially important in a brand new situation, in a situation of transition. There's no history there between the clergy spouse and the congregation. There's no opportunity prior to develop a relationship of trust. So that really there's a good reason why that's number 1.
I would just say for the part number 2, always following through. I know there have been times where someone would ask my husband, is it okay to talk with Bonnie about this or that? And, then he tells me, oh, so-and-so is going to be contacting you, and you never get that call. So then you're kind of left wondering, did they decide not to? Did they just forget? And, it wasn't I that was contacted, so I don't feel that it's up to me to follow through. So
I try to lay the groundwork before the new clergy and clergy spouse family ever arrive. I lay the groundwork with various church groups, doorstops, reminding them that the clergy spouse is not on the payroll. And I may say that many times during the course of a transition. He or she is not on the payroll. Don't expect the same type of involvement. I use a kind of a 6-month rule to safeguard or shelter the spouse from expectations. And I let them and church members know that that's kind of the way I operate as chairperson. Give the clergy spouse 6 months to acclimate to the church, to see where their gifts might fit, where they may want to participate or join. Don't expect them. Don't, invite them to attend various things, but don't expect them to show up. Clergy spouse are not the non-working by your husband or wife's side every minute of the day anymore. Many are working professionals who work day and night and raise children at the same time, and now are being teachers at the same time. I let the church know by talking with the clergy spouse what their priorities are. What day off do they prefer? What times of day are they available? Do you really want everyone to have your cell phone number? I talk very honestly with clergy spouse about these things. Because I know that many churches do have high expectations of clergy spouses. We do not in our church, but many do. When is family time? What's important to them? Clergy spouse on social media have the ability to control friendship requests. So I let them know that, to my mind, it's not rude to wait to accept a friendship request. If you want to wait those 6 months or 6 weeks, that's fine. You don't have to accept them all.
I find it very difficult to set the boundaries when someone's asking for help, and it's something that I can help with. I know personally, I try to give myself a year before I decide what I'm going to do within the church family, what jobs I want to take on, what service I want to do. The reason I give myself a year is it gives I get a chance then to see the entire church program for a year. And one of the things that I give myself as a top priority when in a new move is helping my children to transition. And giving myself a year also gives me a chance to see what their sports seasons or their music seasons or what their seasons and change are going to be. So I know and have a pretty good idea of where my free time is going to be and where it's not.
I think for me, the biggest challenge is in the area of communication. I think it's a very common thing for someone to come up to a pastor's spouse and say, hey, I didn't get a chance to tell the pastor this. Can you pass this message along? Or what do you think the pastor would think about this? And, oftentimes folks, trying to pull me into their dialogue with my spouse over an issue in the church, or even just something as simple as passing along a message. And, you want to be helpful. You're in a new place. You want to be a helpful person. You don't want to be a roadblock. You don't want to be a doorstop. You want to be a doer. But on the other hand, I'm not a messenger service either. And it's really maybe not my place to be in some of these conversations. But I don't want to be off-putting and say, gee, you need, I'm sorry, I won't talk to you about that. So that's always a challenge for me, that dance around communication when people are trying to use me as a conduit for communicating with my spouse. Sure. On the communication issue that I mentioned, I actually did have someone come up to me one time in a very helpful way that they came up to me and said, look, I have this issue. I really want to talk to your spouse about it. I don't want to get into it too much. I don't want to get into it with you, but what's the best way for me to reach her or communicate with her about that? And I was happy to say, hey, right now, given what's going on, here's the best way to reach her. And that actually kind of has equipped me with a tool that I like to use sometimes when I do now get approached again like this, is to, instead of, diving into the content of it, or instead of promising to pass something along, I say, you really need to talk to her about that. And here's the best way right now to reach her with that. And that's been a helpful tool for me in setting boundaries in these communication issues.
The biggest help for me in setting boundaries is my husband. As the pastor, he is very good at starting with SPRC teams and saying, she doesn't have a role. She'll choose her role when she's ready. And then really standing up for me in the weeks and months ahead until I choose those roles. During nominations committees, he never speaks for me, but will often say, you need to talk with her. And he will not be the person who will speak to me about taking on roles in the church.
The three clergy spouses here all have been involved in congregations where their spouse is pastor. There are plenty of clergy spouses who will not be involved in the congregations where their spouse is pastor. And we have a number of part-time clergy appointments this year, and it's very possible that the clergy spouse is not going to be involved in that congregation, could be attending a church elsewhere. And so it's really important to honor that, first, that the clergy spouse is a child of God, regardless of whether that clergy spouse is part of your church family or another church family.
So the pen pal with another child in the church was helpful, and that's from a PK. The other thing I was thinking about when I saw this question was that during one move, the children that had grown up in the parsonage were adults. They were either finished college or in college, and they invited our family over, and the children that grew up in the parsonage made sure that they were here. because they wanted to take my children around and show them where the Great Sledding Hill was, where it was fun to have a campfire, to camp out on the church grounds. Just things that they remembered and really enjoyed there at the church during their years of growing up. They wanted to share with my boys. That was meaningful to me. That was meaningful to the boys.
Well, just that in a way, some of the questions that Betsy outlined for people to be asking of pastor spouses apply to kids too. What are you interested in? And doing a little bit of research, finding out what the kids are into, and then are there people in the congregation who have a similar interest that will help them feel connected. Our kids as adults now tend to really remember the church members in their childhood who had some common interest with them, something like that they shared, maybe a sport, maybe music, maybe an instrument. But making those connections, and you can only do that if you make an effort to get to know who they are and what they're interested in.
Yeah.
I think right now, everyone's used to videotaping things and sending. To have the kids in the church videotape a hello message to the PKs coming in, sharing what they enjoy about school, just things that will be helpful to get to know each other. One of the things that we did, I work in an elementary school. The teachers took pictures of themselves with dogs, and it was a fun little video to share with each other. It can be something very simple that can bring a smile or help you get to know someone.